To go with this video, I'm sharing an 8-hour rain and theta ASMR sleep video. The link to this should be above my head now. It'll also be in the end screen and in the description below. Many people struggle to sleep and look to non-medical means to help themselves. For years, many people would turn to natural sounds as a way of helping them to sleep. This isn't surprising, given that for most of human history we've had a very intimate relationship with nature, having to be able to fall asleep to the natural sounds around us. I remember as a child growing up in the countryside that I would open my bedroom window so that I could hear the sounds of birds and other animals outside. I used to also find it easy to fall asleep on the beach or in the beach hut that my grandparents used to have, listening to the sounds of the sea and the seabirds, or relaxing down by the river in a tent, listening to the river flowing past and the sounds of ducks, swans and other birds. I used to also love when storms would roll in, finding the sound of the rain on the windows and the sound of thunder, especially the low, long rumbles, deeply relaxing. When I was a teenager, I had a cassette player and purchased some nature sounds cassette tapes. These were often 60 minutes long with 30 minutes of nature sounds on each side of the tape. I didn't have a cassette player that could actually flip sides halfway through, so you would only get to listen to a 30-minute part of that track at any one time. At the end of that 30 minutes, it would just turn itself off. Eventually, I was lucky enough to get a CD Walkman. This meant that I could buy nature sounds CDs, which would often still have just an hour of audio, but the full hour would play uninterrupted, which was obviously a much better duration to have playing in the background while I fell asleep. Back in the 1990s, ASMR, which stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, wasn't a term that existed, and generally listening to nature sound doesn't trigger in me the physiological responses that have become known as the ASMR response. But over recent years, audio recordings of nature sounds have often been described as ASMR recordings, and this seems to be the case in a study from a few years ago, which was reported in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, where the study looked at the effects of binaural beat and ASMR for inducing sleep, and decided to use nature sounds in the study. Many things trigger ASMR in people, so there may well be people who experience ASMR from sounds of the ocean, or from listening to a thunderstorm or rain or birds singing, but there will be many more people who just think of these things as relaxing or who dislike the sounds. For example, I've met many people who find birdsong annoying. They really dislike listening to birds singing and definitely don't find the sounds relaxing. When I first encountered this, I was very surprised because I naturally assumed, given that I grew up in the countryside and listened to these things all the time, that everyone loved the sounds of nature, including birdsong. In the late 1990s, my best friend was living with myself and my girlfriend at the time. We had a bed sit, and so we would have the bed and he would sleep on an inflatable sofa. To help with sleep, when I went to bed, I put on a playlist of nature sounds that I had on an MP3 player. There was about 20 hours of audio in the playlist, which I would put on random. At the time, my girlfriend and myself lived in the studio flat, so we just had a single room that we lived in. We all went to go to sleep, turn out the lights, and turned on the playlist of nature sounds. A couple of hours later, I was awoken by the sound of my best friend moving around and swearing. He'd gone to the window of the flat, opened it, and was swearing out of the window. He was really angry, and I asked him what he was doing, and he told me that he was trying to work out where the singing birds were coming from, that he was trying to sleep, and all he could hear was the annoying sounds of birdsong. In his dazed, tired state, he hadn't realised that the sound was coming from my MP3 player. I told him this and that I didn't think anyone disliked bird sounds. I obviously turned off the sounds the whole time he continued to live with us and just played relaxation music instead. I still get surprised today when I get comments from people sharing their dislike to nature sounds in my videos. The trouble with labelling something as ASMR is that it may put some people off listening because they have an opinion of what they think ASMR is. It may encourage others to listen, but in many people it may not trigger ASMR. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have any effect on those people. Similar to what I describe, that I find nature sounds relaxing and they help me to sleep, but I don't get any tingling feeling or other ASMR experiences from listening. My first introduction to ASMR was a comment on one of my YouTube videos early in my YouTube career. It was about 2010, so I'd only been doing YouTube a few years, and someone commented that the self-hypnosis track of mine that they'd just listened to triggered the most incredible ASMR experience, and they hoped that I post more. I'd never heard of ASMR, and so asked them what it was. They told me that it was like a pleasurable tingling throughout the body with a relaxed sense of alertness and absorption in the experience where nothing else seems to matter. They're just so pleasantly absorbed in the experience that they aren't bothered by distractions, and most of that tingling happens around the head and the shoulders and the neck. This person said that they especially experienced this response when I said things like deeper and deeper, that this tingled and reverberated through their mind and body, deepening their experience. This has been borne out in research from 2017 in a paper titled Sensory Determinants of the Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, Understanding the Triggers, which shares that ASMR shares some characteristics with the state of flow, defined as a deeply immersive sense of relaxation and engagement. The flow state is also the same state that you enter when hypnotized for therapeutic purposes, where you're guided into what would be termed an optimal learning state, a state of relaxed, focused alertness, where you're responding automatically. You're absorbed in the experience, and so distractions just fade into the background. The difference between the flow state and ASMR is that generally the flow state is focused on being task directed, whereas ASMR is usually more about being passively absorbed in the experience. Hypnosis can guide someone into the optimal learning state, which could be for task-directed focus or passive focus, depending on the purpose of the experience. The idea with therapeutic hypnosis is for the person to be in an optimal learning state, but this could be active or passive, depending on what the client is trying to achieve. They may be passively guided through a change process or learning experience where the state of mind that they are in is what is important. For example, if they're in an optimal learning state, they'll best learn from metaphors, non-consciously noticing the patterns in the stories and how these apply to their situation, and so can passively have the experience. Or they may require mental rehearsal or psychoeducation, and so get guided into an optimal learning state where they can actively carry out this mental rehearsal or learning in a more automatic way without being bothered by distractions. Sometimes hypnosis may be used just to guide someone into this relaxed, alert state of mind, and may just offer silence or mental imagery to give something for the person to experience, with no goal direction. Hypnosis researchers since the mid-1800s, all the way back to the father of hypnosis, James Braid, have observed that hypnosis is just goal-directed meditation, and that the techniques used in meditation practice are the same as what a hypnotist would describe as hypnotic inductions. The only difference is that the induction in meditation is usually used to guide the person into the experience, with the experience being the focus rather than a specific goal that will be worked on. In the 2017 paper, the researchers explored many aspects of ASMR to try to find out what works best. They found that the highest proportion of people responded to low pitches, and the smallest proportion of people responded to high pitches. This would explain why, when listening to nature sounds for ASMR, many people prefer sounds of the ocean, for example, a flowing river or a waterfall, or the sound of rain or a storm, to the sounds of birds singing. They also found that people like crisp, detailed, resonant sounds, which can explain why people like sounds of rain, where you can almost kind of clearly hear the raindrops, like clarity in static, or the crisp sound of turning pages of a book, and that people like binaural tracks. And binaural sound isn't the same as binaural beats. Binaural sound is where the sound is processed to have locality. So that means that the sound comes from a location around the listener, whereas binaural beats are where two different tones are played to the left and right ears, and the brain picks up on the tone created by the difference between those two tones, and this difference in tone can lead to that frequency becoming more dominant in the brain of the listener. The research also learned what reduces the effectiveness of ASMR tracks or videos. One is if the track or video has music. Participants reported this reducing effectiveness by distracting and interrupting the ASMR response. Another significant one was where the track or video comes across as scripted. People also disliked when things didn't match, like if a sound didn't match what they were expecting, or if the ASMR trigger seemed disturbing or dangerous in some way to the listener. These things together also explain why many people respond favourably with an ASMR response to my tracks and videos. They aren't scripted. My voice is often deep and resonant, especially when I'm encouraging deepening the experience with counting down or saying words like deeper and deeper. And for years, all of my recordings were made with stereo microphones. Now I use just a mono microphone. And I would use hypnotic techniques just like I do in real life with subjects. I'd move the location of my voice while talking so that to the listener it can feel like I'm talking into their left ear or their right ear or in front of them. I would sit up and slouch down during recordings, which would make it sound like my voice was coming from higher up above the listener or lower down, like my voice travelling to the pit of the listener's stomach. My ability to alter the locality of my voice helped with increasing intimacy with the listener, making it feel like I was talking directly to them. This intimacy, where the person feels like you're paying them your close attention, is also something which people rated as important to developing an ASMR experience, as well as the context. So it was more effective when the scene was set and the creator is settling the listener into the experience and connecting with the listener. I used to also make many of my tracks with music editing programs where I would record a main track and then listen back to that track, and while I'm listening I'd record supplemental material that I would then edit together using the audio editing software to make different aspects of my voice come from different locations around the listener. So I may count down from 20 to 1 and place each number that I say at, say, 18-degree intervals around the listener, so that it sounds like my voice is moving around the listener while I'm counting down. Or perhaps at 72-degree intervals, so that it sounds like the listener is descending a spiral staircase as my voice goes around a couple of, say, 3 times around their head. and that would help to create a feeling of absorption and locality of the experience, like it's happening all around the listener. The paper explored how long the ASMR experience should be focused on one element for the ASMR experience to be elicited and pleasantly experienced by the listener, and how many triggers people like experiencing at any one time. The most ideal duration was about 5 to 7 minutes, and the ideal number of triggers was 1 to 2 triggers at a time. So an ideal ASMR video would likely hang on a trigger for about 5 to 7 minutes before moving on to the next trigger. It was found to be important that transitions to triggers felt natural and not jarring. The researchers felt this could also be why perhaps people disliked scripted experiences, because if something seems scripted, it can be stilted and rigid and not have a natural flow. Likewise, if there was a jarring transition, this could snap the person out of the experience. There were some ASMR triggers which are highly effective for some people but very, very disliked by others and are very divisive. So the research recommended that you avoid these triggers if you're trying to appeal to the widest audience. Things like mouth noises, and instead, if you want to appeal to the maximum number of people, then focus on low, resonant tones and 5 to 7 minutes per trigger. In a paper titled Deep, Soft and Dark Sounds Induce Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, they state that it takes about 2 seconds for an ASMR trigger or change to a trigger to elicit a response in the listener. But it could be that you focus on something like mouth noises, which you know many people will dislike, but you know that the channel isn't for them. It's for those who like mouth noises, who'll be the niche audience which enjoys your videos. The same with whispering. Some people really like it and resonate well with it, and others really dislike it. It isn't such an aversion as mouth noises, but for some people, they find the sound of people whispering creepy. So again, just because most people like something doesn't mean that you have to target most people. You could target those who do like that one thing. In the 2019 paper in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, Possible Effects of Binaural Beat Combined with Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response for Inducing Sleep, that I mentioned earlier, they looked at the use of a binaural beat mixed with nature sounds for inducing sleep. Binaural beats are interesting to use. I've been using them since the late 1990s for brain entrainment. The idea is that when you listen to the beat through headphones, for the best results, the frequency that you're listening to becomes more dominant in your brain. For most people, binaural beats are unpleasant to listen to, especially for sleep or relaxation, where the tone can sound unpleasant and perhaps uncomfortable. Because of this, it's often disguised in other sounds. For example, in my Peaceful Piano Deep Sleep and Dreams album or YouTube video, I disguise the binaural beats for the various stages of sleep within the piano music. The idea is to make it so that the listener can still perceive the binaural beats, because if you can't perceive it, it doesn't work, but they aren't distracting, because they seem to be in the background rather than dominant in the recording. In this paper, the researchers decided to use a single binaural beat. They chose 6 Hz, which is the middle of the theta brainwave frequency, which is the first dominant frequency that your brain develops as you fall asleep. It's associated with stage 1 sleep, and also with being in a meditative state or being deeply relaxed. Dominant theta waves also help with memory consolidation, processing information, and learning. By using a theta binaural beat, the idea is that this would encourage the first stage of sleep, and hopefully the listener would then drift deeper through the stages of sleep themselves. The researchers established the best ratio of binaural beat to the overlying natural sounds. They state that this could be refined further by testing more options, but from the options that they tested, they found that a 30 decibel to 60 decibel split worked best. That would be the natural sounds are about 60 decibels loud and the binaural beat is 30 decibels. 30 decibels is established as being about the loudness of what would be thought of as background noise, so the general kind of hum of the world around you when you're in a quiet location, while 60 decibels is about the loudness of what you're listening to when you're listening to something at a comfortable level. This combination worked best for inducing psychological stability and activation of brain signals at the target frequency. One challenge as a content creator is that you aren't able to control these things. You can't make someone listen to your track or video at 60 decibels, but you can make the difference between the ASMR sound and the natural sounds, in this case, the right ratio with the underlying binaural beat. This is what I did in the accompanying video to this one. I set the loudness of the nature sounds to -6 dB, which, sitting about arm's length from my laptop with my laptop volume set to 40, records an average of 60 dB loudness. I then set the theta binaural beat, which is made to the same specifications that the study found worked best, which was to have 250 Hz tone as the carrier tone going to the left ear and a 256 Hz tone playing to the right ear, so that the 6 Hz difference is what the listener's brain will entrain to. This binaural beat was set to 36 dB, which registered at 30 dB loudness. At this level, I can hear the binaural beat if I focus on it, but the main sound that I hear is the rain sound, which is the nature sound that I decided to go with, as the most popular two sounds were rain and the sound of flowing water, like the sound of an ocean. The brain can begin to match with the binaural frequency within as little as 2 minutes, so using binaural beats can be a very effective way of quickly altering the dominant brainwave frequencies, helping to change brain state. At this level, after 10 minutes of listening with eyes closed, all regions of the brain are responding with theta activity, and following just 10 minutes of listening, there was a significant reduction in anger, tension and depression, and an increase in calmness and happiness. The 8-hour rain and theta ASMR sleep video that goes with this video replicates the process from this experiment with a 250 to 256 Hz binaural beat, 6 Hz theta frequency and rain for the nature sound. The only difference is that my video continues for 8 hours for those who perhaps would like it to be playing all night or perhaps all day in the background to help you to keep calm and happy during the day. Being 8 hours long means that it should be long enough for most people to listen to for as long as they would like, whether it's for just 10 minutes for a short meditation, whether the rain and theta sound in the background, or for 30-minute nap, or listening while reading or studying where you want to remain in a calm, relaxed state of mind, or for sleep. Have you tried ASMR? How did you find it? What, if anything, did you find worked for you? What about binaural beats? Have you tried using binaural beats for brain entrainment? And if so, how have you found that? Share any comments that you have below. Thanks for watching.